Hi, welcome to Sartor TV. I'm Jennifer Crumpton, and today I'm talking with Amanda Pacitti. She's the VP of Learning and Development at Time. Amanda, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Amanda, you started out as a newspaper reporter in Rhode Island. Tell us a little bit about your career history and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So I'm from Rhode Island. I grew up there. I went to college in DC, and when I was home on summers and I would freelance for this tiny community newspaper, and I did some other freelance journalism as well. So when I graduated, I'd gone to study journalism. When I graduated, I ended up going back to this paper that I had worked at, and I spent a lot of time doing interesting, fun, things you cover the sewage treatment plant or town council meetings, which actually is really interesting because there's such it seems on the surface really simple, but as you delve into things in communities, you find a lot of interesting stories and beats. So I did that for I think 6 to 9 months or so, and then I was like, you know what, I want to move to New York. And one of my mentors at a different paper I had freelanced for had connected me with someone that had worked at this small, it was called Media Bistro. I don't know if you know it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
very
so
familiar.
It was the early stages of this company. So they were mainly known as this job board. They had a blog network, and they also had this educational sort of community there. So it was in the era when it was first writing for the web is a big thing. Or I'm going to use WordPress, what does that mean? And that changes were first happening in the publishing community and the media community specifically. So I ended up getting a job there as what they called an education assistant, and I basically helped schedule, plan, and run these in-person and online classes. It was early stage online learning. So I did that for a few years, and one of my mentors there ended up getting recruited by Time, and she took me with her. And I've been there since, and she actually started her own company, and I ended up taking her job. So that's sort of my trajectory.
You know, a lot of people these days are interested in how do I find a mentor, particularly women in the workplace. So how did you
I feel
seek out
people,
your mentors?
I got really lucky. I've always had sort of an advisor in every job I've had. There's different approaches to mentorship. If you ask someone, be my mentor, can you be my mentor? It's kind of awkward, right? You're not going to have an organic relationship like that. The approach I've always taken is in any job you have, there's always someone that you're okay, that's the person that probably has power, control, influence, and they seem really cool or warm. So I usually reach out to that person and start talking and listening and seeing how I can help them. I've gotten lucky though, because my bosses have always just been interesting, empathetic, smart people. Nice. So I've benefited from that. I think an approach that I really like that some people take is instead of having that one mentor that's the be-all, end-all mentor, having sort of a board of directors for yourself. So if you have a few people that you go to, and you go to anytime you have a big decision. So you could say, oh, I have this former boss that I really like that's in a totally separate industry or field, but they have great advice, go to them. Someone that was a professor or teacher, a friend that you really trust that has an interesting career, either something that you do or in another industry. And then someone internal that you work with at the company, either in your own department or role or even outside of that. And I think that sometimes people build up mentors to make it this big, enormous thing. Oh my God, I have to find a mentor. If I don't, I'm not going to succeed. It's going to be this whole big thing. Any job you have in the world, there's always someone there that's you know what? I could learn from that thing or that person or something, that experience that person had. So I think it's important to just approach any experience looking for that and listening. And sometimes too, I notice I talk a lot to people that are new in their career, just starting out. So they're obsessed with their first job, not what if my job isn't at this big company, forget it. When I get to the big company, then I'll focus on things. There are people at every job that you can learn from. So wherever you are, find a person and just reach out. Not with be my mentor, but just ask them questions about how they got where they are.
Yeah, and I think you really said something interesting about reaching out to these people in influential positions who seem amenable and saying, how can I help you? That's a really interesting way to form a relationship with them where you're adding value as well as them being a mentor to you.
People love help. People forget that. What I think is really cool, I always love when we have interns in pretty often. One of the most interesting or remarkable things to me about someone, that's an intern that might say hey, how can I help you? Instead of simply coming up to someone and asking that question, kind of tracking what they might need help with and reframing the question. So I might say like, hey, what's something you don't like have time to do or focus on, or what's something you're really interested in? Or I might, if I were like an intern or new in a role or a position, like notice something that someone needs, come up with a plan and say, hey, how does this strike you? And get someone to react to it, because it makes it easier to get advice when it's through the lens of a project or something like that. Whereas sometimes it's hard to say like, hey, how can I help, to someone as a general question. Does that distinction make sense?
Absolutely. That's great advice. So tell us a little bit about the specifics of your role at Time. Tell us what you do on a day-to-day basis and what your overarching goals at the company are.
Sure. So I lead learning and development, and I didn't know that was a job until I had it. I had done like external learning and experiences and helped really teach and train people, and I didn't even know that that was a thing that big or medium-sized or even small companies invested in, like actually having people that dedicate time to training their staff, which was exciting and cool. I've been at Time for almost 5 years at this point, and I've actually been able to grow and scale our team. So our mission, I always say, is to help smart people learn. People that are already really interested, already like super smart, and to help them really own their career. And we do that in a few ways. So a lot of it is one-on-one coaching, like helping people actually understand their goals and help them grow as leaders. We do a leadership development program, so that's what I spend most of my time on, really training our managers with that consistent baseline of how we approach leadership as a company. And that kind of program is a great way to really drive the kind of behaviors you want as a company culture. And then a lot of the stuff we do is really like tracking trends in what skills people need and partnering with people in the business to lead a program. So it could be sellers saying, you know, I really need to know this new digital platform or this tool or this product that we're bringing to market, and helping organize a workforce against that. It could be something more DIY, like, hey, I'm a reporter and I want to know how to use my iPhone so that I can pick up meaningful footage that can be part of a larger video. Our philosophy is to respond to the needs of the business. We lead a few programs really well. We have online learning to supplement that, like skills-based stuff. We have a contract with lynda.com, so that's where people can do more skills-based training, like Photoshop or CMS or like a Java. And then for anything that's really culture-focused, like leadership development, we would take a hand and drive that. Does that sort of make sense?
So it sounds like you have a lot of different types of internal clients, per se.
Yeah.
How do you offer things that apply to so many diverse, like a reporter or someone in the corporate, you know, side of things? How do you create things that work for so many different people?
I think the interesting thing is, so for the programs we run and lead, we do things like, as I said, leadership development. People think that in their functional job, it's so different to be like a manager in edit, or a manager in sales, or a manager in like PR, or a manager like me in HR. There are universal things that actually you can apply when you step away from your function. And in some cases, when we lead that program, stepping away from like the idea of your functional expertise actually like helps you really think about how you are as a leader. In response though to other, like there are diverse needs, and we have a diverse workforce that focuses on different things. A lot of the time, what we spend our time on is partnering with someone in the business and saying like, okay, you're an expert at this thing. I'm not, explain it to me. And helping them simplify that idea is really helping build a curriculum that they can lead to our workforce. So we partner with people and help them suss it out and then help them lead it. And in some cases, being sort of like generalist versus expert helps.
So everywhere that you've worked in your career trajectory, you've risen very quickly and you've made very strategic moves. I'd love to hear how you did this. Was this sort of your plan from the beginning of your career to get to where you are now?
To be like the head of learning at Time. I like graduated college. No, I didn't know that was a job. I didn't enter my career with a plan. I wanted to do writing. I left college and did some journalism. That's like what I had focused on for the most part. And I was like interested in like a lot of academic research stuff. I didn't enter my career with a plan. I kind of entered it with an open mind. and I've benefited from really great mentorship. And I think that the coolest thing about what I get to do is that it's purely about helping people in something that is like essential to their everyday life.
Yeah.
So in the way that like sometimes like when you're in a university setting or college, like you take a class and it's like, wow, that's so inspiring and great. We get to do that thing and then take it and make it really practical. Like you can actually see the benefits of people's skills changing or behavior changing or having coached someone and then see them like rise to success. So I think that entering without a plan kind of benefited me, but I think that the summation of that is that when you have a job and just entering any job with that open mind and that willingness to say, okay, I'm going to make this like the most important thing while I'm here. Even if it isn't like if you graduate and you get a job and you're like, ugh, this isn't the job I'm going to have forever.
Yeah.
Got it. It's not. But you can learn something from any experience or opportunity. And if you enter into that experience saying, this is important, I'm here anyway, let's make it work, you're going to learn something and it's going to take you far.
That's such good advice, in particular for people coming into the workforce out of college. And, you know, there's always a lot of discussion about millennials and the job market and kind of what they're having to go through, you know, but I think there is sort of this idea that you have to come out and have this fabulous job right out of the gate, and, you know, keeping an open mind. And, you know, maybe in the past there was some kind of pressure to have a plan, but do you think these days the best thing for young people is to kind of just ditch the plan a little bit, see what real life is like, and see what you can...
I can't say. You know, some people have a plan and it works really well. And it's always good to have kind of a loose plan and then leave room to pivot.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that the important thing is just like entering with that like freshness and that attitude that's open, and then, you know, taking what you can from an experience. And it's okay if you're like, you know what, I'm done with this experience, but at least you took something.
Yeah.
And you're not like in your first job and you're like, this is stupid, I'm sitting here, I'm gonna sit here and until some magical other company hires me.
Right.
Because what you're doing is probably gonna get hired away based on what you do there or what you do outside of work. So if you're like not happy in your first job, like find something that you can do outside of work that's meaningful, that applies to the skills that you wanna grow or where you really wanna be. I think a lot of times people have this like perception that like the other job is the best job and there's gonna be no challenges there. It's gonna be super easy. I'm gonna like walk into like Goldman Sachs and whatever. It's gonna be awesome. I don't know why in this scenario it's like a finance trajectory.
Yeah.
But there's challenges and positives in any role and any experience, and it's important to be conscious of that.
So tell us a little bit about some of your key learning programs. You've sort of touched on some of them. And how you developed them and how they work.
We develop everything, as I said, in response to the needs of the business. And I guess the example I'll point to, because it's something that I'm so close to, is our management development program. Great. So in environments or any work environment, you're going to ask leadership, like, what do people need? And usually it's like leadership development or management development. Like, that's not shocking. You hear that, I think, across the board. So we heard that was a need. Instead of just kind of either outsourcing something or coming up with something that we just like said, okay, like people probably should be good at feedback and like goal setting, like done. And what we did was my boss had these series of leadership roundtables. So we invited the top level of the company. So like anyone at the SVP level, basically anyone who reported into a C-level executive. We invited them to these things we called leadership roundtables, where it was like in a small group of 6 or 8 people. We said, okay, we hear that we need leadership development. What does that mean to you? Like, what are things that people actually need? Here's a list of some ideas that we have and how other companies approach it. How does this strike you? And from there, we actually were able to build a program based on insights from that group. Now, of course, the baseline is, you need to be good at feedback, good at goals, et cetera. But we were able to actually develop that more and really reprioritize some of the focus areas and how the content was executed based on those meetings. So we did that over the series of like a month, because there were, of course, like hundreds of people, I think about like 125 people that went through those roundtables. From there, we said, okay, again, we want this to be meaningful. We don't want to just like reach out to the company and say like, come to management training, because you want people to feel like there's a connection to this. So we had that level of people say, we said, okay, like now we need people to pilot this program so that before we like launch this en masse, we know that it's meaningful, relevant, and it's built in a way that people are going to hear it. So we had that level of group nominate people in the company that across like it's, so this program is for managers up to the VP level. So it could have been their direct report, someone else, anyone that's a people manager. So we had that group nominate people. And then those nominees came to 2 different pilot sessions. So we ran 2 pilot sessions. And to that group, we said, okay, you're in a pilot session. We need your help. Does this resonate? What parts work? What parts don't? And then included them in that experience. From there, we actually had a baked program that changed a bit based on all of the feedback that we got from those 2 groups. And then it became this thing that was like, oh my God, I have to get into the management program. Like, have you done the management program? Like, I want in. It's cool because it's something that was built by leadership, and we had time to hear like what works, what can we change, and now it's a program that we're going to reach. So we've reached like 200-ish people so far. We've enhanced it, and we always enhance it along the way. And like by the end of next year, we'll reach 800 more people.
Wow!
So we've scaled it quite a bit since then.
Yeah. So is there sort of an internal mindset from leadership at time that really kind of allows you to run pilots and testing in this way? You know, I know so often there's this pressure and get it done now and make it happen now, and it sounds like you have an environment there that maybe, you know, allows for some wiggle room to actually
we still make things happen quickly. Like there's urgency like all the time. But even with that, for something like that's so important, like leadership development, you're not going to be like, yeah, cool, we'll do it next week, like because then it won't resonate. Like that's something we built over like 2 or 3 months. If it's something like, hey, we're launching this sales tool and sales people need to know, we're not going to be like, yeah, let's wait on that. Like let's
test
build
that
it
out.
Yeah, no, but for something that's about like a leadership program is something that probably is about driving behaviors you want in your culture. So that's going to fall flat if you haven't built it with people that are part of the company and built that interest. So that was our approach there. And then it makes it almost easier to launch stuff in that regard when you say, oh, we're going to experiment it. Like we're doing a pilot. And it's not this big formal thing that's like pushed on the company by HR. And I've had success in corporate environments piloting stuff because it's like not this big formal thing, there's no risk, and you're including people in the company in getting their feedback. For something that's more like a quick turn, like something like a platform or a tool where you need to organize a workforce around something really tactical or tangible, that's something you can do really quickly because it's usually there's like a very literal output, like people need to understand like X tool, let's do it, let's make it happen.
What are some of the key considerations that you go through in your mind before deciding if you're going to outsource designing some of your learning programs? Do you do that? How often do you do it? Why would you outsource?
If we're going to hire someone that's not like me leading a program or someone at Time Inc. leading a program, it's going to have to be something that either we shouldn't be investing like our personal resource time in, or it's going to be something that would really benefit from an outside voice. So I gave you an example of leadership development. The important thing there, and what we got loud and clear as feedback, is it was so meaningful that we led it because it's about our culture. So that's not something we would ever hire an external person for. We do, though, use a tool called, I said, lynda.com. So we have a contract with Lynda. I'm not going to say, me, Amanda, or my team is going to invest time in like teaching a Photoshop class. I could build that out. I could make sure that things resonated, but it's not necessarily the best use of our time because there are such great resources that we could just hire out for that. So we can let people use a tool like lynda.com for that, or we could say, is there a school in the city that does that for X team? That's something that already exists. We wouldn't invest our resources on it. The other example is the outside voice. So we have a partner that we work with. It's through the Fast Forward group. They do this thing that they call a Fast Forward, which is really about like high performance leadership, high performance management, and they've started to do this as like a women's leadership program.
Really?
So we've actually worked with them a few times now, and it's been hugely beneficial. So we have a leader internally, Karen Kovac, she runs part of her sales organization. She launched this network at Time called Women at Time Inc. And she started thinking about women's mentorship and leadership there. And within that, we were able to run a leadership program for women leaders at the company. And we're going to do another version of it next year as well. That's something that is an actual premier program. This company, Fast Forward, does it for Facebook and Univision, NBC. They do it for other clients. It's something that is this like baked program, and it almost does benefit from having an outside voice. People connect with one another, they have a fresh voice, and it's this really baked program that's totally specific to Fast Forward, and people love it, and they join this community to do so. So in that example, it kind of does make sense to have an outside voice guide people through this experience rather than someone internal, because it's almost like this benefit and this external experience that they benefit from.
So for you, Amanda, what is the importance for setting performance standards for L&D internally? And how do you do that? How do you set those standards? How do you enforce them?
That's a great question. I think that with anything, like especially in leadership, it's about how you come to the table. So if you come to the table with a clear vision and approach to what good is, your team really will be part of that. So the cool thing about our team is that we're all really different. So we all have very diverse skill sets, different personalities, like different styles, which is amazing, and it complements and builds like a strong, truly high-performing team. The thing that unifies us is we're all obsessed with like action. So we're really like I'm kind of a theoretical person. Ideas are cool. Action is better. Like I love seeing ideas happen and come together as like an event or a program or a class or something. Someone on my team runs events. He has the same approach. He loves seeing it come to life. Someone on my team is really purely like an excellent facilitator. Same approach. Someone on the team is a designer. Same approach. The thing that unifies us is seeing things come to action and not necessarily being afraid to try new things. And we constantly change anything that we bring to the masses. Like anything that goes out to the company, if we do it once and it's something that's recurring, like for example, we lead orientation at the company, that happens all the time. Obviously, we're always hiring. That's something that we change after every turn based on feedback. So we're obsessed with feedback surveys. I mean, of course, there's like a standard baseline, but all we want is feedback. And that's something also that I think drives high performance. Being really comfortable with saying like, yeah, what worked? What could we do better? And we're all like that, and it makes high performance or driving for change or fixing stuff not this scary thing. It's just something that you're used to. And it drives, I think, high performance in that way. The ability for our team to be, obviously we're like super close, but we invite feedback from each other all the time, which is, I think, the most important thing, to make feedback like a safe, important thing, drives high performance.
And do you sort of implement a philosophy of avoiding that fear of failure within your group? You know, I mean, failure might be a dramatic term, but not being afraid to say, hey, this didn't work, we're going to try something else.
Yeah, I think that I've always had bosses that were really open to that, and I've benefited from it, and I've learned from example. And I think that it's an example when you're like, if I'm a boss, like I manage people, and I know something didn't work that I did, I should own that to my team and say, hey, guys, that didn't work. Here's what I think we should change. What do you think? And I think that sort of sets the standard. People are gonna make mistakes and programs, and if you're not making mistakes, you're not really trying, right? So, and we have like pretty regular check-ins about any kind of feedback happenings for any programs we do. So I think just having that openness with yourself and with your team really sets that standard.
What are some of the challenges that you've encountered of effectively training the new generation of the workforce?
Yeah, see, my boss always speaks about like we have this thing like millennials aren't millennials. I like have to put air quotes because it's
just
like
people.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's so and it almost like makes it like people that aren't like whatever the age group of millennials is, are like they're not as like fast. That's not true. A thing that's like a marketing construct, like my boss always reacts to it, so I react to it, because I don't think it's true. I think that people that are interested in high performance want, or just in general, like people want place and purpose. So if you're doing that with a millennial population, you should be doing that with everyone, like making sure that work standards are really clear and that people have a path. And I think that when people talk about like millennial programs, really what they're focused on is like retention or making sure that there's like some kind of growth opportunity, but that's not something that people want only when they're like whatever, 22. It's something like everyone wants a path and to feel like in context their work has value. We try to infuse that into any program we do, but we don't have like a dedicated millennial focus. Like I know companies do, we don't have that.
That's great. I think that's fantastic, and I'm so glad to hear you say that. I think that needs to be vocalized more.
Yeah, I mean, we have diversity groups at the company that do programs and career experiences, and we actually have a group called Media Upstarts, which is for emerging professionals, so people that are newer in their career. That's something that's more of a community, and there are events and experiences, but we don't have like a training program at the company that says, millennials, like you're this way, like you need this.
We're going to cater to you with our training.
Yeah, no, it's just that everyone wants that in a job, right?
Yeah. What are some of the digital strategies for training and learning that you've implemented that have worked really well across your workforce?
We have two tools that we use for online education. One is Linda, as I said, so that's more like really for they have other things. They have like theory classes and comm and management. To me, that's something I refer to people for really tactical skills. I don't necessarily need to go sit in a room with someone for a few hours to learn how to do like a pivot table in Excel. I could probably like watch this on my own, got it, and then like be good. So that's something we use for tactical skills training or direct people for tactical skills training. The other thing we have is this great tool by a company called Instructure. It's called Bridge. It's super cool. So it's our internal learning management system. So I know a lot of companies use really like formal LMSs. We love Bridge because it's very simple. You can edit it in the way that I could edit like a blog post on WordPress, and it's visually beautiful. It's very clear. It feels like consumer focused, like clean and easy to use. So we save and really record any class experience we do. So say we lead a sales training. There'll be a webcast component. We use a tool called Adobe Connect for that, which is great because it drives high interactivity. There's a great there's a great chat functionality. It's really a seamless experience for remote people, outside of New York, people to engage in the training. So we would record a session there, and we would host it on Bridge, our learning management system.
Okay, so you can record your own and then host it on Bridge.
So it's functioning almost like as a repository for us. Bridge is for our classes, and then we built classes there as well. So we do this thing at Time Inc. called behavioral interviewing. It's like this method and approach to hiring.
Really?
So hiring managers can take this certification to use behavioral interviewing when they're hiring.
Tell us a little bit about that. What is that?
It's cool. It's this thing that's like, if I'm interviewing you for a job, instead of asking you like what you would do in certain questions, I focus on past performance. Because past performance is what drives probably success in a role. So instead of saying like, why do you want to work at Time? Or like theoretical questions, or like, what would you do in this scenario if this happened? I would say, hey, it's really important that you, in your role here, are like fluid and flexible and like open to change. Like, give me an example of a time that a project shifted. So you anchor everything in past examples in a way to make sure that someone will be successful in a job or that they're a fit for a role. So that's like it's not something we invented. It's something that is an actual like thing. There's like a certification for this that our team in HR has.
So you're getting real life examples of things that potential employees have done in the past.
Yeah, because it's the best indicator of how you might perform in a future role. So we use that thing. That's something we certify people in. We do classes on it in person.
Cool.
We also built an online class for it. So we have a video producer like come in, record our instructor who leads it. That's actually someone that's a recruiter on our HR team. She runs recruiter operations. So we recorded that, we built it, we posted on Bridge, and there's like interactive quizzing features that we can add in to make sure that people really understand the methodology. So it's for Bridge, to summarize, it's a combination of a repository of things that we've done that we don't want to lose sight of, so that when someone new comes in, they have access to all that good stuff, and also things that we built, like behavioral interviewing, like that online version of the class that we do.
Amanda, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of digital learning?
No disadvantages, because it's really cool to live in a world where you have access to information all the time. I think that's amazing. Our internal, or sort of my internal rule would be we use online learning for stuff that feels more tactical. It's probably really Excel or Photoshop, something tactical where I can watch a video and probably digest that information. When we bring people together in person, it's probably experiential and something that's designed to drive culture. So I wouldn't direct leadership development to something that's like an online class. We would do that in person because it's about our culture and bringing people together there. If it's something that's tactical, I would point people online.
Tell me a little bit about how L&D sort of leads the way across the corporation when it comes to enabling knowledge and learning and sharing of knowledge company-wide. How do you lead the company as L&D?
I think that the first most important thing is having an HR reputation that's strong. So if your HR leadership doesn't have a strong reputation in the company, you're probably going to have a challenge driving learning and development at the company. But say you do have a challenge there. The most important thing is talking to people and asking what they need. So I find that sometimes training is a way to actually drive communication of ideas, and it's not necessarily something that in a person's mind feels like they need a training thing. So when we talk to internal clients, it's everyone on our team sits down with people constantly and just has coffee and says what's going on? What do you need? That's something that's important to our team. I usually frame it not as what training can I help you with, but what challenge are you having? What's something you're working on? And a lot of times that's something that you can drive change with through training or through a communication about something and some sessions about it. So I think that when people don't work in learning and development, they don't think of their problems as oh, I could solve this by having a training about it. Right. Sometimes there's an obvious extension of, oh, I need training for something. A lot of times it's more about oh, I'm having this challenge. And that's something a lot of times that we can solve with learning and development because we do events, we have coaching, there's a wealth of things that we could offer people.
So does analytics have a role in L&D today?
Of course it does. It has a role in everything you do. We live in a world where tracking things matters, and we have the ability to track and measure things in ways that are interesting, so of course it matters. I think that something that learning people are focused on, at least me, is coming up with a way to kind of take all of the analytics that you have available and put them in one real hub. So there's disparate analytics tools that are great that we do a really great job of measuring. Centralizing those, I think, is going to be the next wave of HR technology. And I think that the cool thing that's happening right now is HR technology is starting to feel clear consumer technology, something that's obvious, that's easy to measure. Sometimes I don't do well with traditional HR systems. They make me confused because they're not clear and they're not simple to use. So right now there's a lot of really simple tools and platforms that I think are making that kind of data about people and what people need as clean and interesting as a Google Analytics.
And how are you managing that? I mean, I can imagine it can be pretty tough to bring it from sort of an unclear, maybe dispersed kind of situation into a centralized and clear kind of format.
So we actually have an operations team focused on analytics within our HR department, which is something my boss cares a lot about and something we've invested in. I think that the important thing for anyone is just starting with what you have. If you're at a state where you're you know what, I have this one tool, I don't love it, instead of waiting to switch or wait for data to be perfect, to just start looking at what you have and start being rigorous about it. So we as a team have calendared events where we will say, okay, we're going to go through all the surveys this month about this. We're going to go through all the surveys this month about this, and actually building it into your calendar. That's what data is. It's information. It's not this big amorphous thing. So even
scary for some people.
Yeah, but even if you're managing things through 12 different platforms, fine, sure, start there. Start reviewing it. And then, of course, I have the advantage of we have a team that actually focuses on this stuff. But you can start anywhere.
How can leaders like you build a culture of being a learning organization. How do you do that in your role as VP of L&D, but also encourage your team to do that and to create that culture of learning throughout the organization?
I sometimes talk to people and they're like, oh, there's not a culture of learning here. People don't care about learning in different companies. And that always makes me like, really? How? Because I feel like anyone I've ever interacted with loves like access to learning. So like I've never met someone that's like, I don't want to learn a new thing. Like I don't want to like learn something that's going to help me in your job. I think it's all about how you position something to someone. So if something feels like you're forcing it and it's not immediately relevant to a person's need, they're not going to be interested in it. Like I wouldn't be interested in something if someone didn't connect it to a need that I had, and people and organizations are just the same. So I think that like it's like one of those like sort of people are similar, like people are the same. But I think one of the important things that we do is just think about like what people actually need, hear from them, and go from there. Like that's how we build things. And I think a lot of times if you're new in an organization too, you might hear a need from someone and you're like, okay, they actually don't need that. Like they need something else. Cool, got it. But probably like to start, just to build up your reputation, why don't you first focus on that thing? So if someone tells me like their most important thing is like training their team on, I don't know, like public speaking, and I'm like, wait, they don't need that, they need this. Like, cool, that's my opinion. It's not what that person, my client, has expressed. So why don't I first focus on that thing, do it well, so that I've built a client there that like actually trusts me and likes me. Then when I'm like, hey, you actually might need this thing, they're gonna trust me because I've executed and delivered for them. Yeah. Again, we don't like I don't love to use the word like training because it feels so formal. I think just hearing what challenges people have and actually coming up with solutions is what actually drives your reputation. So if I hear something's like a problem and I say like, yeah, cool, so that's, yeah, I hear you, that's not helpful to people. Like they want to feel like they're heard and that there's some path, which is why I think that we've done a good job, at least at Time Inc. with my team. We're really good about having options. So we have like online options for something simpler. We have programs, we have coaching opportunities. Like we've built different kind of experiences of like a 360 feedback tool. So I like to always think of, okay, like what's something I can offer people just to feel like there's like some proactivity here and that there's a path forward.
Do you have ways that you incent people to give feedback? I know sometimes that can be something people feel like they don't have time to do, or they may not be willing to think through it.
Do you know what a BHAG is?
No.
Oh, it's so funny. It's like a corporate, like it means big, hairy, audacious goal. Instead of like it's like instead of a clear goal, like sometimes leaders are like, you know what, let's give something impossible. So like a historical example of that is like JFK says, like, we're gonna put a man on the moon. Like, no idea how, I'm just gonna say it and it becomes true. So some companies do that too. On our team, we have our team BHAG, which is 100% completion of feedback surveys, which is like, whoa. And like, of course we didn't meet that, but we started the year at like 40% and ended the year with like, last year, with like 70% completion, which is a huge change.
That's a huge leap.
And it's simply by caring about it. So we spent a lot of time studying how you get people to give you feedback. People are more likely to give you feedback if they do it right there. So for a quick program, like something like an hour-long workshop, or like when people are right there in the moment, we pull up a link and we say, okay, like pop out your phone. We care about feedback and we actually change all this stuff based on your feedback. Let us know how we did. So we do a survey in the room. For something where more like long-form experiential thing, like a leadership development program that we have that I've spoken about, we actually have an opportunity after. We do this other debrief with people, like that's like a mini 360. That's a way for us to track behavior change. It's also a way for us to say, hey, did you do that survey? If you haven't, I'd love to hear like what worked, what didn't.
And so just let them verbalize to you if they have not taken the time.
Yeah, and also I think people have like, if people get that there's value in it, they'll do it. It's not like, oh, we're doing this so that we can have a vanity statistic about ourselves. It's like, no, we improve things. And the other cool thing that I learned from this other actual public speaking class I took, and the guy there told us about this approach to feedback. His name is Bill Hoogterp. It's this company, Own the Room. So instead of saying like, hey, how was that? You ask 2 questions. What went well? What can I improve? because people are more likely to criticize you that way. They feel like safe and it's more directed. So we've done that with any program, and we study like surveys quite a bit.
What are some of the key skills that you think make you successful in your leadership position and that leaders generally need to have today to be successful? Are there particular skills that stand out to you as, this is super useful to me?
I think that it certainly helps to, like, my team is really smart. Like, they're just really
so
smart.
Hiring the right people?
Yeah.
It's a skill.
Yeah, I also think, like, I really care a lot about, like, teams being close and having shared goals. So, like, drive high performance on a team, or what's really helped me have great people or be, like, successful would be, like, having shared goals and giving people autonomy.
Yeah.
And, like, a lot of times, like, I think sometimes people take the approach that I'm the boss and, like, adapt to how I am, which is, like, not effective.
Yes.
So I think learning about people, learning about what motivates them, and just being open to trust people first. Like, instead of, like, you build trust by actually just trusting people. If someone on my team or in our department, like, makes a mistake, that you're supported and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
My boss has been great about that, and I think it's just really about autonomy and actually caring about people's paths.
What are some of the primary skills gaps that you're seeing in the workforce, and are you addressing them in a particular way?
Skills gap. It's not skills. I think that what's happening right now is there's, like, a mindset shift. So we're moving, and maybe we have in some industries, we're moving away from an era where people had really specific expertise to a more generalist kind of approach, where I don't have, like, a deep expertise in X thing, but I have, like, a general approach that would help me succeed. We're used to, I think, as, like, a workforce, have people that are like, oh, that's the person that does X thing. But that's totally changing. Yeah. People are now like, oh, like, that person's a digital person. That doesn't really mean anything. Like, that's, like, a weird way of saying they're someone that's, like, used to learning new things. So I think that the shift that's happening is not, like, a skill-specific thing, it's a mindset. There's gonna be a new tool that comes out, like, constantly. I'm gonna be like, okay, like, I'm open and interested in learning that. And I'm gonna be comfortable not being an expert at certain things and saying, actually, if I have a generalist approach, I'm able to organize experts and translate information to people.
How can your L&D programs actually serve as a retaining tool?
They give people skills to become leaders in our organization, and they drive those behaviors. We have, like, a philosophy at our company that we, like, love and support internal mobility. Your boss does not own you as their person. You're someone that's, like, working at Time Inc. And that could mean that, because we have the benefit of being kind of a bigger company, there are paths internally that exist all the time, and we can support that. So part of that is sending people to programs, and, like, in our management development program, we just remind people, hey, we endorse mobility here, and we should. And we totally accept, like, your boss should be the first person you go to when you're like, you know what, I'm thinking about a new job. It can be a new job internally. It also can be a job outside the company too. And I think that if we take that really, like, empathetic, like, person-based approach to everything, that's really what drives great careers at the company, and even great careers outside of the company.
Do you get any resistance to that, or is that something you think is becoming more and more accepted?
There was, like, this perception when I started working that there was, like, your work life and your home life, and they were, like, different things. And I'm, like, a different person at work than I am, like, in my private life. I don't think that that's a thing or true, and I think that companies and organizations are moving to this approach where it's like, wait, like, people are kind of like people, and I'm going to treat them as a person at work rather than, like, a formal work professional person that doesn't have the nuanced experiences that, like, we all come to the table with. So I think taking that approach where it's like, hey, we're people, let's be empathetic about your path, is really, I think, something I would respond to, at least, and I think people will respond to.
Amanda, thank you so much for being here with us on Starter TV and sharing your expertise and your insight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.